they're not really sure. They're not really sure about the the thing they want the audience to remember. So I call that a central idea. And my speech tonight is going to revolve around how you put a speech together. But I want you to pay special attention to the concept of the central idea. Now, what we're going to do is talk about how you can get your point across in 3 to 5 or 7 minutes or less, and using the central idea. And I invite each of you, as I speak, to think in your mind of what your next speech is going to be and use the principles that I'm talking about as I go through this. So it will be a collaborative workshop, you working with me to create your next speech. I think I got the word of the day in. Okay, very good. Now let's, oh boy. Trying to change to the next slide. And you know what? I'm going to do this without slides. I'm going to do this in the old-fashioned way. And that is without slides. There we go. So why is it important to get your message across clearly and cleanly and simply? It's great for communicating with people at your job, in clubs or organizations to which you belong, for marketing purposes, for sharing your ideas and thoughts, for your speeches in your Toastmasters club. It's important to help you overcome your fears of public speaking and to practice the skill of being a good communicator. So people join Toastmasters to overcome fears, to learn skills, to practice for elsewhere, to create new material, and for a sense of family. But in every case, getting your idea across is very important. So whether you're new and creating an icebreaker first speech, or whether you are creating a later speech, here are the steps that you follow. First, you must decide on the purpose of your speech and the content. And both of those in connection with who your audience is. So you have to think about audience, purpose, and topic. Who are you talking to? That's the audience. Why are you talking to them? That's the purpose. And what are you talking about? That's the topic. You need to think of these things in your mind. So let's say a little bit about each one. If you think about who you're talking to, how much do they know about the subject? How much value is your subject to them? These are things you have to consider. Will they be interested? Can you make them interested? Okay, this is the audience. As for the purpose, usually we speak to inform, to entertain, or to persuade, sometimes to amuse. And sometimes it's a combination of more than one of these things. So thinking about your audience and the topic that you're speaking on, what purpose do you have for your speech? And of course, I want to say a word about the topic. The best thing to speak, the best topic to have, if you want to help overcome fears and to use your speaking skills effectively, the best topic is something you know about, something you are very familiar with, or something you're really curious about and want to speak. When I travel abroad, which I do a couple of times a year, and come back, I give speeches to my Toastmasters clubs, right? And I want to be able to communicate clearly with them what I saw. My purpose is to inform, maybe even to inspire people to travel as well. So audience, purpose, and topic. Who, why, and what. Those are the things that you need to focus on. Now, sometimes one of these is much more important than the other. If it's the topic that's really important, think about that first. If it's the audience, then you figure, how can I take this topic and be meaningful to this particular audience? And what do I want them to do at the end? That's the purpose. Do I want them to travel to where I went? Do I want them to have a better and richer understanding and knowledge of the places I went to? What is it that I want them to do? Maybe it's just think about, maybe it's just appreciate, or maybe I'm trying to convince people to travel where I went. As a matter of fact, many times I travel to places that other people have talked about in their speeches. Next month, I'm going to Cambodia and Java because someone else went to Cambodia and Java and gave speeches about them that I appreciated. Okay. A couple of things about your audience. Are they friendly or not friendly? Are they knowledgeable or not knowledgeable? Are they interested or not interested in your subject? And in every case, you have to manage these elements. If they are not friendly, you need to be very careful in how you approach the subject. If they are not knowledgeable, you need to go slowly and carefully and provide much information. If they are potentially not interested, you need to give them a reason to listen at the beginning. I'm going to move ahead now to the next important part of a speech, and that is you have your topic. You probably have an idea for a title, although that's not really important at this stage. So the next thing is to come up with a central idea. Central idea is a concept we use in teaching public speaking in college. It could be main idea or theme or whatever. But what I want you to understand about a central idea is this. It is the single most important element of your speech. If you get nothing else out of my talk today, it is the central idea is the single most important part of a speech. So what is a central idea? In the first place, it's a complete sentence. I hope that you know the difference between a complete sentence and a phrase or an incomplete sentence. A complete sentence, in the terms of a central idea, has a subject, a verb, and points in a direction. So if I'm giving a speech, for example, about, let's say, Barodapur, which is a Buddhist temple in Java, what is the main thing that I want to get across to an audience if I want them to appreciate, understand, maybe read about, maybe even travel to Barodapur? Okay. So the single sentence central idea might be something like, and I'm just creating this on the spur of the moment, Barodapur is a World Heritage Site commemorating the largest Buddhist temple in all of Asia. Now, everything I talk about has to support that material. Okay, so that's a central idea. It's a coherent thought. It's a complete sentence. It should be memorable and something that you repeat during the speech several times. It's kind of a summary of who, what, and why. And I want each of you to think right now, what is the topic of your next speech going to be? And I want you to start thinking about what is my central idea for that speech? And make sure that it's a complete sentence. Make sure that it's simple sentence so you can repeat it easily. And make sure that it answers one or more of the questions: who, what, or why. Here's an example that I use in teaching my students in public speaking course and in a media training course. Media training courses that I teach are about how you talk to the media and get your idea across. And this example we use is called deer population control. So we have a terrible problem here in America, and that is that thousands and thousands of times a year, automobiles run into deers. And the deers are killed, and sometimes the people in the cars are killed. And we have some graphic examples, which I'm not going to show you. So here are some of the issues. the annual cost of deer car collisions is that 200 people die, more than $2 billion in damage. Something must be done. What must be done? So there are two different approaches here, and each of these could be a central idea. The central idea for one group of people would be deers are most effectively and humanely controlled by hunts conducted by trained hunters and sharpshooters. It's a little long, but it still gets the point across. Now, everything you talk about has to support that. Or, and we have two groups, we assign each central idea to a different group. The other group's idea would be deer are most effectively and humanely controlled by a mix of non-violent means. So you see that each central idea here points in a different direction. One central idea talks about hunters killing deers to manage the population. How can that help? Well, that's the subject of your speech. You give several different reasons why that works. Or the other group would be doing a central idea of deer are most effectively and humanely killed by nonviolent means, and you'd have to go through, there are many nonviolent means of controlling deer populations. A note about the entire context of a speech. As you know, a speech has an introduction, a body, and a conclusion, or a beginning, a middle, and an ending. Keep in your mind that the introduction at the beginning of the material, where you tell people why they should listen, and where you tell people what your central idea is, and maybe forecast what your main points are going to be, that should only be 10% of your speech. And the ending, where you quickly summarize what you talked about, should only be about 5% of your speech, which means that the middle of the speech is about 85%. These are rough figures, but this will help you in constructing a speech. Always start with the body of the speech. Start with a central idea, and then what are the 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 main points I want to get across? Then you fill that in with what's called support material, facts, figures, little stories, anecdotes, lists of things, whatever will explain the main point that you're talking about, which is in itself an explanation of your central idea. So I've talked about a lot here. Normally, this is a 6-week course of 2 hours each, so that's a 12-hour course, and I've tried to compact it into 10 minutes here. But the main thing I want you to remember, and what the central idea of this speech, and what I want you to remember is the central idea is the single most important element in your next speech. Back to you, Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you very much, Lance, for your amazing speech. I'd like to see if anyone has any questions to Lance. I didn't see any questions on chat. I see.
That means people were fascinated with what I was saying and they didn't have time. Yes, Ella, unmute.
Thank you for your speech. It was really enlightening. My question is, you can present your speech comfortably in the context that you explained if you know your audience. What if you don't know your audience? You have no way of knowing your audience, or you have a big variety, like all kinds of people in your audience. How do you pass this central idea? How do you tell your whys and whats and all those things? What changes? What changes in your speech?
I have several different answers to that question. The first answer is you should always know something about your audience. So if you've been invited to speak to a group and you're not familiar with the group, talk to the person who invited you. Ask questions that will tell you how much they know about the subject, whether they agree with your topic or opposed to it, whether you have to be persuasive and convincing or just motivating and inspiring. So you need to find that information out. But if you don't know it, then you need to assume the second part of your question, which is that there's a wide variety of people. Some are in favor of what I'm talking about, some are opposed, some are knowledgeable, some are not. And you acknowledge that at the beginning of your speech, something like, and I'm doing this off the cuff, but something like, I understand that this group is divided on this subject of deer population control. Some of you favor one side, some of you favor a different way of approaching it. I'm going to try and speak in a way that will help you understand my point, which is that deers are most effectively controlled by a mix of nonviolent means. And I bear with you, the people who like to see hunters, listen carefully to what I'm saying. It's okay to have a different opinion, but I want you to consider the possibility of what I'm talking about. You see what I mean? Yeah, you need to acknowledge disparities in the audience, but the first thing to do, and I'll give you a quick example, and Malcolm, let me know if I'm talking too long here, but I was asked to speak on media training to a group of city managers in Southern California. So there were about 100 people. Each one has a job called city manager. It's not the mayor. City manager is the one who gets things done, right? And I did not know much about them or their job. So I got there early. There was a reception, and I went around and talked to several people. And I said, what's the biggest challenge you have as city manager in talking to the media, to the press, to TV or newspaper people? And I asked this question individually of several people, and at least 3 different people said some version of this. The biggest problem I have is that the mayor for whom I work is having an affair outside of his marriage, and I don't know how to deal with that with the press. Well, that was very funny. But I got that answer 3 different times. So when I started the speech, in my very first words, I said, I got here a little early and I talked to several of you and I asked the question of what's the biggest challenge? And you'll be interested to know, remember, there are 100 people in the audience. You'll be interested to know that the biggest challenge you seem to have is that your mayor or some other very important figure in your in your government is having an extramarital affair. Well, the whole audience broke up in laughter, and it seems maybe that noise is my clock telling me that it's 9 o'clock here. I have a clock that uses animal
It's
noise.
9 o'clock.
Anyway, does that answer your question, Elif? Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah, you put the yellow sign up. Okay.